the origins of intolerance and hate and divisiveness, and exploring how we might be able to get to a place of greater love, unity, and tolerance. In fact, this discourse, which was authored by the fifth Chabad Rebbe, was all about promoting love amongst the community, love amongst different folks in the community. It was explored, it was taught at a time when there was a little bit of friction between people, and the love wasn't there. And this discourse was taught once, it was taught twice, it was taught multiple times in order to foster this sense of collective love. It explores the notion of unity, disunity, and then unity from a place of Kabbalah, from a mystical place. In other words, what are the mystical origins of tension amongst people? And we begin with a biblical story. I'm just recapping very quickly so that everyone's up to speed. We're up to chapter 5 of this discourse, which is known as Heicholtzu Ranat. This was taught in Ranat would be 1908 or so. So this discourse, 1898. This discourse begins with the biblical story of the war against Midian. The Torah tells us that the Bible tells us that before Moses passes away, God tells him that he has to fight one final battle. He has to lead one final war, or lead the Jews into one final battle. And that is against the nation called Midian. And then God tells Moses, after that, then you can pass away. After that, you will pass away. This is one final battle. And the questions that we asked at the beginning of this study series is, why is it so important that Moses fights this battle against Midian? Who is Midian? We know who they were historically, but what does it really mean? Why is it so significant that Moses himself fights this battle? And throughout this discourse, the idea here that we're presenting is that Midian is not just a nation, but Midian is something that's a condition that we all possess inside. And it's something that requires us to fight against every day of our lives, every moment of our lives. And just like with Moses, God tells him that this is the ultimate battle that you will fight. And once you are victorious over this battle, that will constitute the culmination of your mission, and you can pass on. So too for us, this battle against the inner Midian constitutes the epitome and the tachlit. How would you translate tachlit? The ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose of our being. So who is Midian and what is Midian? So Kabbalah teaches, this is straight up our discourse, Kabbalah teaches that Midian represents Madon umeriva, which means tension, conflict, and fighting amongst people. Midian is not getting along. Straight up, not getting along. Fighting with someone else. And the idea of battling Midian, I didn't hear it, but I'm smiling anyway because I know it was probably something. The idea of battling Midian is to dedicate oneself to fighting the inner tendency to dislike someone else. And the tendency to dislike someone else we're exploring comes from, at its core, comes from a sense of yeshut. What is yeshut? Yeshut means ego, I. A sense of, if things are like the way I like them, and people look the way I like them to look, and people think the way I like to think, then we're okay. And if not, then we're not okay. That idea that everything has to look the way I like things to look, or be the way I like things to be, or think the way I like things to think, or the way I like to think, right? That comes from a sense of ego, from yeshut, from I. And that is the greatest divider amongst people.
How do I spell that yeshut? How do I spell that word?
It's a Hebrew word. I would say in English it would be yeshut. Wonder if we have it here in the text. Let's pass around this text actually, so that everybody can have a reference as we go along. Please take and pass. Huh, everyone already has? Oh, okay. Well, not everyone. Okay, so keep it rotating like a good NBA offense. Okay, so let's see if there's yeshut here in the text. We might find it written here. Let's see, chapter. Oh yeah, it writes it here as Yeshus, page number 8. It's written a few times, second to last paragraph. The idea here, though, is that it's the ego of the human being that really drives a person to have friction with somebody else, with another human being, and it's what drives people apart. The other big idea here is that this is rooted, this inner drive of a person to not like someone else actually has a spiritual origin. In other words, not that it's good, but it has a spiritual origin. What is the spiritual origin? So Kabbalah teaches that before our world, that's called the world of tikkun, the world of repair, there was a world of tohu, the world of chaos. And in the world of chaos, there were very high energies. The sfirot, the 10 energies of that world were very volatile. And that volatility led to what's known as the shavirat hakelim, the shattering of the vessels, which made that world implode or explode, probably explode, I guess. And the shards of that world constitute the fragments of light that are embedded in the construct of our universe, which were meant to uplift as we go through life. So the world of tikkun is really about repairing the world of tohu, the world of chaos. The world of chaos, morning. The world of chaos, the reason why it's chaotic is because...
You okay if we do some videoing?
Sure.
Anybody opposed to some videoing?
You have a makeup artist? Can you make sure to get this side?
You can do everything in post-production now, and I can do makeup afterwards.
That's right. You're better.
All right. So the world of tohu, why is it so chaotic? It's so chaotic precisely because, as Kabbalah says, there was ribi ar and ma'at kelim. There was a lot of light and only a little bit of vessel. You had too much energy and not enough container to contain the energy. And why was it so volatile? Why was there so much energy? So at its core, it's because each of the sefirot, each of these energies, couldn't get along with the other energy. They couldn't get along with the other energy, and they felt each one was totally isolated and self-contained. So chesed, love, was pure chesed. Gvura, which is discipline, was pure gvura. Tiferet, which is harmony, was pure harmony. Netzach, ambition. Hod, humility. Yesod, communication or bonding. Malchut, sovereignty or leadership. They were all pure 100%. Those attributes, those energies, and they could not tolerate the other energy, the complementary energy. And therefore, when you have a situation where each item in the room is amped up to 100% and is not giving space for the other, that becomes a very intense room. It becomes a very intense space, and it's a room in which something is going to blow up. And that's what happened. And so, although in the case of the world of tohu, the world of chaos, it was by divine design that this explosion happened in order to produce the massive amount of light that we have embedded in potential in our realm. So although it was by design, the bottom line is the factors that led to that shavir, that led to that shattering of the vessels, the factors that went into that were this notion of feeling self-contained, isolated, self-contained, or the most important energy in the room, in the space, whatever, in the realm, and not giving space for the other. This becomes the source of ego. And ego is the klipa. Ego is the negative trait that is embodied by the ancient nation of Midian. So when we talk about the Midianites in the Torah, the Kabbalah say, you know who the Midianites are? Midian is something inside of each one of us. Midian is the sense of I am important and the other one not so important. And if they don't see things like me, then there's conflict and tension. So Midian is the tension that we have with the other. One other point that he mentions that I want to recap very quickly before we jump into chapter 5, which deals with Chochmah and Bina, which is going to be a tremendous discussion. So one other point that I want to mention is he says the hallmark of holiness is something called bittul. I guess you could spell it B-I-T-U-L, bittul. Bittul means self-abnegation, self-nullification. It means not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself a little bit less. Not spending so much time focused on self. Bittul is, I can allow space for someone else. So holiness, kedusha, holiness, is defined in Kabbalah as that which possesses the trait of bittul, of giving space, allowing space for the other. Whereas evil or negativity, known as klipa, the shell, i.e. the negative force within the universe, the hallmark of that negative force is yeshut, is ego and not allowing room for the other. So again, if it's holy, it gives space. If it's unholy, it takes up space. So, when it comes to physical things take up space. If my car is parked in a parking space, you can't park there. I mean, you can, but then insurance is going to have to get involved because it's going to get a little bit messy, right? If my car is parked in that spot, you can't park in that spot. Because that which is physical also, like the forces of evil, that which is physical is also related to the realm of klipa, the shell. It's not holy. Physicality is not in and of itself bespeaking a higher truth until it's revealed to be speaking a higher truth. But until that point, physicality, materialism, is all about self. And therefore, if my car is there, your car can't be there. It's a zero-sum game. Only one is going to get it and the other will lose out. And there's a conflict. Whereas when it comes to such traits such as love can have two things in the same space and it's fine. Right? Love can tolerate an enmeshing of two beings or two hearts into one space. There's plenty of room when there's love. It's the way it is. So when there's a state of holiness, a state of kedusha, so there's an abnegation of self, the ego is not all filling, and that allows space for the other. When you have a status, when you have a state of klipa, of negativity, of evil, or materialism, then you have a state where it's me, basically, versus you. Now, to bring it back to the notion of tension amongst people. This was the end of chapter 4. Again, we're going to start chapter 5 this morning. The end of chapter 4 is so gesund. So he says that when a person says that I dislike this other person because of X, Y, and Z, you have to be very careful. Is it really because of X, Y, and Z, or is it because of ego? Is it really a rational consideration that we decided we truly dislike that person based on, valid rationales, valid reasons, or is it that simply something about them makes me feel less secure or comfortable or whatever it is within myself, and my ego being challenged or being somehow feeling a little bit defensive is causing me to relate to that other person in a less than loving way. And he says, oftentimes, when a person says that I dislike this person because of, it could be downstairs also.
I think I see both. I just want to make sure it's both are represented.
Okay. Or it could be up here for the very same. Yeah. It could be both. We don't know. There's no different ring. So again, when a person is in conflict with somebody else, what chapter 4 of this text encourages us to really look deeply inside and ask ourselves the question, or really ponder this possibility that it's not because of a legitimate rationale that we've maybe told ourselves or told others, but rather it's because of ego. In which case, it's our job, like Moses, to fight against Midian. Not an external enemy, but our internal ego that is preventing us from entering into, being in a real relationship with another person predicated on love, acceptance, and unity. Does this make sense? Yes? Okay. So those are the first four chapters. Let's begin chapter 5, page number 9. Now, chapter 5, page 9, he begins to map this out within the Kabbalistic construct of the Sefirot. I mentioned 7 emotional Sefirot energies before, but there are 3 intellectual Sefirot as well. I don't have enough copies for everyone to have one. Actually, looks like it went around. This is fantastic. You guys are like, these things happen when I least expect. Okay, so if you have this sheet, if you have this sheet, so take a look. There are 3, and some of you have seen this like 1,000 times, but it's okay. It still hasn't changed because it's part of the fabric of the universe. It ain't going anywhere. There are 3 intellectual faculties, right, left, center, Chochmah, Bina, Dat, and 7 emotional attributes, which we discussed before. I love how it's color-coded. Blue, intellect, red, emotional. With water, usually blue is cold and red is hot, correct? Yeah, sometimes. Faucets, that's what I mean, faucets. So intellect, by nature, is colder, more analytical, more objective, whereas emotions are passionate, subjective, warm, fiery, hence the blue and hence the red. So keep this in mind. Today we're going to explore what is Chochmah, which is the top right, the first of the 10 Sefirot energies, and the first of the 3 intellectual energies or soul powers. And specifically, we're going to look at Chochmah as opposed to Bina. What are the distinctions between those two? So let's jump in, chapter 5, page number 9. Thus, we can understand why the Klipa of Midian, again, Klipa means shell or evil force of Midian. Midian is that ancient nation that Moses was told to fight, but again, it's referring to within us, within the universe, and within us specifically, the energy or the evil of ego that can cause so many problems in our lives and in this world. So he says, we can understand why the Klipa of Midian opposes Chochmah, wisdom, as is stated in Ma'orei Ar, which is the Kabbalistic work, in the entry of Mem, the letter Mem. Midian, of course, begins with the letter Mem. It's a M sound. So it says in Ma'orei Ar, which is a book of Kabbalah that kind of goes through letters of the Hebrew alphabet and words and themes that are appropriate for each letter. So under the entry of Mem, section 13, it says the following. Midian is the name of the Klipa that opposes Chochmah. So there you go. The antithesis of Chochmah is Midian. And the antithesis of Midian is Chochmah. What is Midian? We said it before, right? What is Midian? Midian is ego. So what is Chochmah? If Chochmah is the antithesis of Midian, because Midian is the antithesis of Chochmah. So again, if Midian is ego, what is Chochmah? Bittul. Right? Chochmah, yeah. If Midian is ego or yeshut, right? If Midian is ego I, then Chochmah is self-abnegation. It is well known. Here we go. Next paragraph. It is well known that Chochmah is characterized by bittul. I could have written this thing. Right? Chochmah is bittul. This concept is alluded to in its very name. The word Chochmah comprises 2 words, koachma. Now, this only works in the Hebrew. You take a look at the word Chochmah in Hebrew, which, if you flip over your sheet to the other side, you can find it right there. So there's the English version and the Hebrew version of this chart. So look at the Hebrew side, top right. I got you. It's good. I got you. No, it's even better. All right. Chochmah, is a word that's comprised of 4 letters in Hebrew. And if you divide the letters into the first 2 letters and if you divide the word into two and two sets of two letters, so the first two letters, and you switch them around. So the first two letters spell the word koach, which is power, and the last two letters spell the word ma. You know what ma means in Hebrew? What? Like ma nishtana halayla at the Seder, ma nishtana, which is translated at the Seder as why is this night different? But ma really means what? What? It's a question. Ma is a question. Ma is a question. Why? What? Whatever. It evokes a question. Koach ma. Koach means power. So what is koach ma? So different ways to understand it. Koach ma means the power of what? It could mean the power of the question. It could mean the power of that which can't be easily defined, to which we ask the question, like, what is that? What? It's so intangible.
So like quantum particles that flash in and out.
Kind of, sort of, right? Like something you would say, like, what? Like, that's a power, but what is that? Chochmah, sorry?
To go off of that, that's exactly where I was thinking when the professor was here. The question, when you ask a question, you're breaking something down into a smaller part, and then you keep questioning that and that and that until you get to the truth.
So, and this is what I want to speak about Chochmah. So, again, this koach ma, Kabbalah says Chochmah is koach ma, the power of ma. That can be explained in many different ways. But one way to explain it is regarding the power of a question. You see, what is Chochmah? Chochmah is the intellectual power of creativity. Bina, by contrast, is the intellectual power of analytical thought. Chochmah is creative thought, and Bina is analytical thought. Both are powers of the mind, but very different powers. You have people that are geniuses, creative geniuses, but ask them to show you how to build it out, they're like, no, I got to get my engineering team on it. I have no idea. I just have like the vision. So you have visionaries, Chochmah. Chochmah is the visionary, creative visionary. Bina is the person who analyzes it, breaks it down, understands it, and makes it work. Chochmah has been likened to right brain and Bina left brain. No. I always say that, and Sandy always corrects me, saying, we thought that was a thing, but not a thing.
Not a dichotomy.
Not a thing. Okay.
It's more of
It's kind of
metaphor.
Well, it's what people at some point might have thought was a thing.
It is. But
Yeah.
it's not.
Fine. Okay. I'm perpetuating the myth. I'm fine with that. No, right, but it's the creative brain is Chochmah. The analytical brain is Bina. It's very different. I'm saying Chochmah Bina. I didn't say right or left. I just said Chochmah Bina. It's different powers of intelligence. We have the ability to wonder, to imagine, to be creative, to be visionaries, to have, to think outside the box. And then we also have the ability to break things down, understand it, etc. How does Chochmah happen? The way the Kabbalists describe Chochmah is it's an incredible process. See, Bina is you already have information and you're seeking to understand it better. That's the second power, Bina. Chochmah is accessing new information. It's that creative flash. One way that Chochmah is described in Kabbalah is the Barak HaMavrek, which is the lightning bolt, the flash of lightning. What does that mean? Well, in cartoons and comics, when somebody has a new insight, how do they depict it? The light bulb going off. That's literally, well, almost literally, kind of figuratively literally, what Kabbalah says about Chochmah. It's that light going off. It's that flash, like, wow, I got it. It's that moment where you get it. How do you get that? How do you get there to get that? How do you facilitate or foster that type of the condition that leads to getting things that are new? So Kabbalah teaches that it has to do with recognizing the limitations of what you know and being open to what you don't know. See, as long as your mind is holding on to what it knows, then you'll be stuck with what you know, and maybe understanding better what you know, or maybe driving yourself crazy with what you know. But either way, you've closed your mind in on what you already have. Chochmah is the mind's ability to let go of what it knows and open the door to new possibilities. And in that moment where the mind lets go of what it knows, it's now open to accessing brand new information that the person has never known. You see, there's wisdom in the universe. Whether you want to talk about this on a human level or whether you talk about this on a spiritual level, there is incredible wisdom in the universe. Think about the wisdom in this room. Think about how much you know, all of the things that you know. And then think about how the person next to you has a completely different set. There's some things that are overlapping, certainly, but how many other things does the person sitting next to you know that you don't even know? You don't even know that you don't know, but you can imagine that they know something that you don't know. A lot of things that you don't know. And then you think about the collective wisdom in this room, the collective wisdom inside this building, the collective wisdom inside this community, inside this city, inside this nation, inside this world that's comprised of how many billions of people? 8 billion people? Maybe 9? I think we're pushing 9. Huh?
Between 7 and 8.
I'm getting ahead of ourselves. All right.
Unless you know something we don't know about.
Well, I know of 1 billion or 2 people that are waiting to be counted, is what I'm saying. No. So, which is probably also the case. Here's the point. The point is, if you think about how much wisdom is out there, outside of what's inside my brain, and then you ask yourself the question, how am I ever going to access that? And then you might tell yourself, well, I'll never be able to access that. It's way too big, way too much, way too vast, way too tucked away and locked away for me to ever access. However, here's the thing. We'll never access it if we think that we have all the answers. And if we think that we know all that's needed to know, if we think that whatever we know, whatever, based on the factors of our life, the information that's already somehow entered our brains is the only information that's worth knowing, if that's what we think, then we're not open to learning. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, Ezahu Chacham, who's wise? Chochmah, Chacham, who's wise? You know what the answer is? Halomeid Mikol Adam, one who learns from every single person. And it doesn't mean, well, some people I'm learning what not to do. That's like the cynical way of understanding that. Halomeid Mikol Adam means that every human being has wisdom that you and I can learn from. And as long as we're closed off to that, thinking that we have everything that we need to know and we know everything that we need to have, as long as we think that and believe that, then we're not wise. We may have information, but we're not wise. Wisdom is not how much we know. Wisdom is how open we are to learning. So Chochmah is predicated on koach ma, the ability to question, i.e. to open ourselves up to something new and to ask ourselves, what else is out there? What do you know? What can you tell me that I don't yet know? Not in a challenging way, but in a truly open way. One of the most amazing things that happens at Passover, at the Seder, is that we give our children, and really anyone around the table, the platform to ask questions. And it's no surprise that happens on the holiday that celebrates freedom. Because one of the first things that goes in an oppressive society is the permission to ask. The first thing that goes when totalitarianism begins happening, when things become oppressive, the first thing that happens is you can't ask questions. You're not allowed. You're not permitted to ask questions. We're not taking questions now. Joking. No, I'll get you. I don't want it. Save your arm. I'll get you in a second. Nah, we'll talk in a second. Right? The first thing that goes is the ability to ask questions. This is the way it is. This is the way it will be, and you don't have permission to ask. And on Passover, we tell our children, you know what it means to be free? What? The fact that Pharaoh, an ancient Pharaoh, did this, that, or the other, 10 plagues, that affects my kid's life today in 2019? You know what affects their life? Knowing that they can ask questions. knowing that they can open themselves up to new information, knowing that there is more out there than what they already know. That's what frees them. That's what liberates them. That's what liberates human beings. The ability to ask questions. Chochmah is Chochmah. Chochmah is Chochmah, literally in the words, in the letters. The letters of Chochmah spell Chochmah, the power of what? The power of the question. Because wisdom is produced through, number one, questioning on a very strategic level, to ask questions, but on a more conceptual level, to challenge ourselves to the fact that we may not know everything, and to be open to things that we don't yet know, which is, at its core, a profound expression of the notion of bittul. What is yeshut and what is bittul? Yeshut means I know everything. I have all the information, I have all the wisdom, I have everything I need, I'm good. You, I don't need you. I have what I need. That's yeshut. What is bittul? And that's unholy. That's midyan. That's what we're fighting against inside. And what is holiness? Holiness is bittul. I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the wisdom. Not that I consider myself to be nothing. In other words, not that I devalue myself, but I recognize the limitations in an honest way of my being. Not that I tell myself I don't know anything, I'm not smart, I'm foolish. It doesn't mean to lie to ourselves. It simply means to recognize the limitations of our awareness, of our knowledge. And so, and all of our limitations, to recognize that. And so Chochmah, of all of the sefirot, of all of the human energies, of all of the soul powers that Kabbalah speaks of, Chochmah represents, in the most profound way, the notion of bittul, of letting oneself go, i.e., being open to that which is beyond ourselves. Because that's the only way new wisdom comes in. You can't get Chochmah with ego. You can have Bina with ego. Bina is how I understand it, how I will break it down for you, and how I will explain it to you. Chochmah, which is seeing wisdom outside of ourselves, that only happens through a profound bittul, letting go of self. Now, all that I mentioned up until now was human wisdom, let alone divine wisdom, spiritual wisdom in the universe. That requires an even greater sense of bittul, letting go of the constraints that hold us back on a physical level, and being open to the spiritual wisdom that's out there. I mean, think about the collective wisdom, not only that exists today, but it has existed throughout human history. Right? Think about all that. Think about all of the wisdom that's always existed, and then think about all of the divine and spiritual wisdom that exists in the universe, and how small the little fragment of stuff inside of wisdom inside of our heads is. And again, the message here is that if we wish to truly access something outside of ourselves and beyond ourselves, it requires us to exercise a little bit of humility, a little bit of bittul, to be open to learning something new. True.
So I was going to ask and try to make the connection where Chochmah is on the right and Bina is on the left. I've been slightly obsessed with the idea of Chesed versus Gevurah for the last several weeks.
Right.
I don't know if you know that.
Yes.
But I'm noticing, so Gevurah basically is closed. It's severe, so it's closed. You cannot know, basically. Whereas Chesed is more open, like
Correct.
the wind versus the tree. And what you're saying is also same thing with the Chochmah versus Bina. So is there a reason why they're both on the right versus
I
the left?
couldn't have said it any better myself. The right is marked by openness. The left is closed. Right? So Chochmah is an open mind. Bina is closed. Chesed is an open hand to give. Gevurah is withholding, closed. It's the same construct. One is intellectual, one is emotional. It's kind of polar forces. That's the way it is. You should know, I was reading the most amazing story yesterday. It's probably still here. paper over there called My Encounter. People's stories with the Rebbe. Just the most amazing stories. People share their first-person stories. And this fellow, Michal Machnik, he's an artist who lives in Crown Heights. I know him well. And he was in art and design school, and he encountered Chabad, and he decided to become more, to learn more about his Judaism, and he became more involved. And eventually, he started painting and creating art with a Jewish theme. And he created a mitzvah scene, like a scene of like a lot of good deeds. And he showed it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe sent it back to him with a bunch of comments. And the comments were, he had different mitzvot, different good deeds depicted. And the Rebbe said, take the ones that are of chesed and put them on the right side of the picture, of the art. And the ones that are gevura, like prayer. Prayer is gevura because it's like introspective. It's like it's digging into self. It's not even though we pray verbally, but it's not chesed. It's more gevura. So he said, put the synagogue in your picture, put it on the left side. He's telling them like art direction, but to mirror this, because on a cosmic level, this is where things exist: right, left, center. Rebbe saw like that, yeah.
Isn't right, left, center sort of an artifact that we
Yes,
impose on
your
us?
right is my left,
Well, you're right.
and or left, huh?
No, but not even that. I mean,
Yeah, what's left, right?
This is kind of a superficial,
Listen,
but that's
on an energy level, it represents right, left, center. Now, how do we relate to right, left, and center? I would say the limitation exists within us. But on a perfect level, there is a right, left, and center.
So that means there's got to be limitations in space if there are.
Well, God creates with limitations. Not with God are there limitations, but once God imposed... Listen, these are also limitations. The fact that there are 10 sefirot and not 9 or 11 also constitutes limitation. So we're dealing with, once God imprints limitation upon reality...
Material.
Even before material reality, on reality... There was a point in time before time, and a time before time. This is my trailer voice, not working. And a time before time, our hero, right? So there was a time before time where there weren't any of these sefirot, not 10, not 9, not 11, not anything. There was just God and the Ar Ein Sof, the infinite light. But we're talking about once these energies are imposed, and once they are imposed, not forced upon, but kind of generated or emanated, now you have some sort of construct of right, left, center. I would say our limitation is who's right, who's left, kind of like who's on first.
Well, yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
But also, doesn't it sort of sets up a dichotomy?
Yes.
It sets up a right as being good and left as
No. Left is necessary. Left is not bad.
right.
No, we should be very careful with that. Thank you for raising that. We have to be very, very careful and understand this. Left is not bad. It's just not as good as right. No, I'm kidding. Left is not. I'm kidding.
All the lefties in the world.
No, it's not about that. No, left is not bad. Left is a different modality. You need gevura to balance out chesed. You need chesed to balance out gevura.
That's probably a more productive way of thinking of this as a balance.
Yeah.
Rather than as a.
Well, that's why this is.
Wasn't that what the Rabbi was? I mean, because it almost sounds like from his story that the Rabbi was saying, these should be together. But rather that he was, in a way, talking about how he can take these elements and balance them differently.
Yeah, I think it's exactly about balance.
Rather than this should be on the right or that should be on the left.
Balancing the energy.
I think it's both the same.
The Rabbi had noticed that in the bottom left corner, there is a little house labeled Free Loan Fund and another labeled Hospitality Hotel. And he asked that their location be moved to the right, since these are deeds of kindness, the pillar which corresponds to the right. The Rebbe wanted the synagogue moved to the left, as the synagogue symbolizes divine service, the second pillar which belongs on the left. And he suggested the yeshiva and the Torah books be placed in the center. There was also a factory manufacturing dreidels, but the Rebbe requested that it manufacture Shabbat candles instead.
But so that
I love that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Why dreidels? It's once a year. Shabbat candles every Friday. Let's make something that has a longer shelf life or more frequency of mitzvot.
Well, certainly does.
This you got to read the story. It's there's a few copies over there. It's so cool. Michal Machnik. I just saw him in New York 2 weeks ago. He was sitting the next table over at the banquet.
On your right or left?
It depends. Depends when I was up this way or that way. Here's the point. It's not about one's better than the other or whatever. It's really about understanding that, to me, what this means is that the Rebbe took energies or felt or saw or was aware of the energies as they were. So when you're depicting it in a scene, of course this goes right, this goes left, this goes center. Not that one's better or worse than the other, but this is where
I think that's a potential misunderstanding.
Yeah,
Instead
no.
It's talking about a balance and creating that balance by looking for patterns.
Yes.
But not one versus the other.
Correct.
Because
It's not
both of
versus.
those were similar, but they were manifest in different ways.
the whole objective of this series that we're studying is understanding that one is not better than the other. Right? That's how Tohu came about. That's how the world of chaos exploded, because each one thought that it was superior and the other one was inferior. The whole premise of this is the idea of balance. I will say, when Bob Ross painted, love me some Bob Ross. When Bob Ross was doing his thing, he had the happy tree.
Segue.
Huh?
Go on. Here's a segue.
Here's a segue. Yeah. Ride this thing up. All right. So when Bob Ross was painting, he put the happy trees always on the right. Chesed. I'm kidding. That's fake news. No. I don't know that that's true or not. I just made that up. But here's the idea. There's balance. There's symmetry in art. There's symmetry in life. And the Rebbe was seeking to impress that upon this young artist. Okay, yeah.
So, I have my own study guide, kind of organize all this in my brain. And I've got Maimonides' 13 Principles of Jewish Faith. So, would this relate to number 2, the belief in God's absolute and unparalleled unity? The unity of God. We're striving towards unity in ourselves. No?
I would say unity is more of what we studied in the last text,
Okay.
Shariach V'Emunah, which is God's oneness, that despite all of the stuff that I guess it all goes back to unity. You can't go wrong with unity. You can't
fit it in.
can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. Yeah.
Is there any relationship to the fact that Hebrew was written from
Right to left.
Is there any theory about?
I haven't seen that related to Chesed, but it's interesting. It's interesting. You know my favorite joke about the Coca-Cola ad? You know this one?
Yes.
In Israel? They decided to market in Israel, so they put this 3-panel ad. The first picture is some guy like dying of thirst, and then the next one he discovers a bottle of Coke, and then he's like all energized, and it flopped in Israel because they read it right to left.
Yeah.
Energized, drinks the Coke on the sand. You had to be there. Okay. Never happened, but it would be funny if it did. Okay, so let's jump back in. So what we have here is a discussion about, we're really focused on Chochmah. That Chochmah, of all of the energies, of all of the intellectual energies, of all of the Sefirot in general, Chochmah is the strongest representation of this notion of Bittul, which means it's the strongest enemy of Midjan. If Midjan is all about ego and causing friction amongst different things, not diversity in the sense of positive diversity, but diversity in the sense of, because we're diverse, therefore I dislike you, right? If that's what Midyan is about, that dislike of the other who appears different, then that is the antithesis. That is the kryptonite, maybe, of Chochmah. Not the kryptonite. It's the antithesis of Chochmah. Because Chochmah is bittul. Let's go back inside. Let's see how he explains it inside. The word Chochmah, this is the second paragraph of chapter 5, second sentence. First sentence. It is well known that Chochmah is characterized by bittul. This concept is alluded to in its very name. The word Chochmah comprises 2 words, koach ma, the power of ma. Ma, literally what, indicating its amorphous nature, a state just short of non-existence. It thus refers to absolute bittul within God's infinite light. So now he's talking about Chochmah. not necessarily the way it exists within the human being, which is the way I was explaining it. Chochmah, because Chochmah does exist within us as well as the universe. Chochmah in us is wisdom, openness to learning. Chochmah in the cosmic realm is a sense of absolute openness to God's infinite light. Whereas the other energies are about collecting that light, if you will, or containing the light. Chochmah is about being open to the light, that modality of openness. Kind of like that flower that may open toward the light. Chochmah is open to the beyond. Chochmah also brings about bittul within the realm of the emotive attributes. This is cool. He says Chochmah is bittul, is less about self and more about source, and it brings about, it's able to kind of imprint this also upon the realm of the emotive attributes as well. This is expressed in the spiritual realms as the name Ma of the realm of Tikkun, as is explained elsewhere. Note the explanation of Torah's Chaim, second Maimer entitled Bereshit at length. Okay, so that last point is very Kabbalistic. It's going to take too much time to explain for today, but here's what I want to share. What he just said is that Chochmah, which is the idea of bittul, is not an isolated power unto itself. Chochmah in turn informs the entire construct, imprinting this characteristic upon all of the attributes, even the emotive attributes. So a person can be, let's talk about us, because the cosmic realms, it becomes a little bit intangible, right? But let's talk about us. A person could have strong feelings about something and yet yield to someone else's strong feelings. A person can say, I really want to watch this film. I'm kidding, that was like just a silly example, right? A person can feel very strongly about something and yet say, you know what, I'm going to yield to something, to someone else or to something else. And where does that come from? Well, that's part of Hod, which is devotion, which is the idea, the ability to allow someone else's opinion to reign, or a person's feelings to triumph over one's own. But really what he's saying is, all of that stems from Chochmah. Chochmah is the soul's ability to get out of itself. And that affects the emotions, hopefully, that the emotions also shouldn't get carried away with self, even though emotions are very subjective. Emotions, by definition, are how I feel, not how you feel. Emotions are how I feel. See, Chochmah is different. Chochmah is the idea. It's not my understanding of the idea. That's Bina. Are you with me on that? Bina is how I understand the idea. Chochmah is the idea itself, subjective. Emotions are how I feel. He says here that Chochmah has the power, when done right. Chochmah has the power of introducing a sense of bittul, a sense of self-abnegation within the emotional qualities as well, so that I'm able to temper the I feel or I want with what's best, or with how you feel and what you want. Let's continue. Hence, sure.
So Da'at, it seems, is really part of Chochmah, because you describe Chochmah as you have knowledge, but you're open you're just open. So where does Da'at fit?
That, so the English translations are really not great, because wisdom, understanding, knowledge, I don't know that for us English speakers that means anything significant. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge, I don't know, it sounds all the same in English. But in the Kabbalistic meaning, it's very different. Chochmah is, again, openness to a wisdom beyond oneself. Bina is a subjective understanding of an idea. Dat is a perception and application of the idea, which inevitably leads to an emotional feeling about the idea, either for or against. Dat is how I connect with an idea. Bina is how I understood it. Dat is how I connect with it. Intellectually, but it's intellectual connection. Give you an example. You can understand from today to tomorrow about suffering that's happening in another part of the world. And you can explain it with charts and graphs, and you can give a PowerPoint explanation about it. But at the same time, you might not be moved in any way to act on it and to do something about it. That is the bridge between the head and the heart, which leads to action. The heart leads to action. That is where what you know, that is where you begin caring about what you know. In the mind even. And that leads to a feeling of either chesed or gevura. I love it, or I'm repulsed by it. That's a very strong way of stating it, but in general, one is a pull and one is a push. Right? One is attraction and one is rejection. Chesed is attraction, gevura is rejection. Again, sometimes you need healthy rejection, etc., as we've discussed that many times. But again, it's attraction, rejection. It's like that magnet. Hold two magnets, you hold them one way, they push away from each other, and the other way they lock together. So it's the same thing, chesed, gevura. But what's the key to chesed, gevura? That's that. That is where I take what I know and I begin caring about it. I'm invested in what I know, and it's something that I now, it's not just an intellectual, it's not just theory. It's something that means something. There's a story, a very profound story, about somebody who lived in a small shtetl who didn't know how to read. He was illiterate, he never learned how to read. And so, whenever he got letters, he had to have somebody read it to him. So one day he gets a letter, and his friend reads it to him. And his friend begins reading the letter, and the man begins to cry. And the letter reader doesn't cry. Why? What was the letter? The letter was informing this fellow that his father had passed away. And so the recipient, the son, was devastated and crying. And the letter reader didn't cry. Why not? He didn't understand the letter? Of course he understood the letter. What's the difference? He didn't have the dot. He understood it completely. Every detail of the letter that he read, he understood it. He understood it before the other guy understood it because he knew how to read. The gap over there is not Bina. It's not Chochmah either. What causes the difference between the reactions of the two people is that. Do you see yourself in that information, or is it just an academic idea?
So it's not necessarily intellectual then.
It is. It's intellectual. It's the mafteach in the language of Kabbalah. It's the mafteach.
Empathy.
The kolel shis. It's the key that it's mafteach is key. It's the mafteach, the kolel shis that includes, it's Aramaic, the 6 emotive attributes. It's the key that unlocks the 6 emotive attributes. It's in the language of Kabbalah also, it's the emotions within intellect. It's a feeling within the mind.
Is it not empathy?
Could be empathy.
Sympathy.
But it's still in the head. It's still in the mind.
Sympathy would be Bina, maybe. Empathy is
This I don't know. I'm not sympathetic enough. I'm kidding. No, I'm joking. So again, that's just, you asked about that, so I'm sharing about that. Mainly, the focus of chapter 5 is the distinction between Chochmah and Bina. One being objective, and one being subjective. One being open and one being more closed. One being bittul and one being a yeshut. By the way, we have to be very clear here. When we talk about the notion of yeshut, which is ego, not all ego is evil. Bina is good. It's good to understand something the way you understand it. The problem is, if that's the only thing that exists in your universe, the way you understand something, then we have a problem. If there's no Chochmah, then we have a problem. When Midyan battles Chochmah, Midyan doesn't say that Chochmah is also good, but I prefer Bina. Midyan says there shouldn't be any Chochmah. That's the problem. Bina is holy. Holy Bina, Batman. Bina's fine. Bina's holy. Ego is also holy. The world of Tohu is also holy. The problem is you can have holy things, but when they keep on going down, 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 it devolves into something very, very ugly and very unholy. The origins of hate are a subtle divine ego that in its original form is still kosher. But the way it devolves can be something truly devastating. So know this, and maybe I think this addresses what your point before. When we talk about Chochmah being self-abnegation and openness and learning and wisdom, and Bina is like ego, understanding, my understanding, and we're painting Bina as like this evil force, that's not correct. Bina is not, the left side is not an evil force. It's absolutely fine. If it's the only force around, it could be devastating. The same thing is true with the right side. If it's the only force around, it could also be devastating.
Hillel
But
and
we're
Shammai.
focused on it, huh?
Hillel and Shammai.
Hillel and Shammai, exactly.
Yeah, I'm seeing this as a bell curve where it's the extreme that is in the evil, if you will, or the unholy, not the
Correct.
right and left. Now, I have a different question on, so like, as I said, I've been thinking a lot about Chesed and Gevurah, how it affects the workplace, and I've been trying to. There's a big problem in my industry, in our industry, with self-educated people, self-taught people, which is called the imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It is the absolute belief that everybody else knows what you know, and the opposite of that is the Dunker effect. I know everything I need to know, and so what I'm wondering is, they're both Gevurah, they're both closed, because they both are absolutes in what I'm seeing, that I am absolutely certain that he knows more than I do.
Right.
Or
Or they
absolutely
see
certain
through
that
me.
I
They're
know.
gonna find me out as a fraud, imposter.
And so would that be more of a chesed, or would that be more of a chochmah versus a bina? Is it really open and closed, or is it something different?
It's a good question. We spoke about imposter syndrome in our JLI class in lesson 1 of Warrior to Warrior.
Really?
You should listen to that.
I'll send you my article. I wrote
Yeah.
about that as well. Yeah.
See that? We can trade resources.
Yeah.
Is it more? Yeah, it seems to me as more of a left side construct of limiting what I know. I don't know this, or I do know that, but it's more of an ego left side, whether it's in the mind or the heart, whether it's an idea that I have about myself or a feeling that I have. Either way, it's either here or there. That's what I would say at first glance, but this requires further elaboration, certainly.
What I was seeing was that you have to have a little bit of the closed and a little bit of the open to say, it could be that I know what I know, and it could be I don't.
I love what is it, Kruger-Dunn? What is it?
The Dunker effect.
Dunker, yeah. That's
So
where I think I know.
This is where I know everything.
Right now,
and then
yeah.
you're so closed that.
Yeah. I love that effect. It's great. I know it well. All right. But let's do one more paragraph, and then we're going to close out today. Hence, Chochmah is the ultimate state of synthesis. In other words, Chochmah gets along with others. Because it's open, it gets along. When it's closed, it doesn't get along so well. But Chochmah is open, therefore it's synthesis. This is discussed in connection with a teaching of the Zohar, page 10. Parsha Kedoshim, on the verse, "You are my witnesses," where it is stated that the original division of the letters into distinct entities. You know what? We're going to elaborate on this next week, but let's just read it today, and then we'll pick it up next week. It stated that the original division of the letters into distinct entities is specifically the function of midos, or midot, the emotional energies. However, from the standpoint of Chochmah, no division of distinct letters exists. When we formulate ideas in our mind, on the state of Chochmah, you don't have letters of articulation in your mind. When you are seeing the concept in its purest form, when you're open to a concept, you don't yet have it defined in your own mind with letters and language saying this is what it is and this is what it means. Because you're still open to the possibilities of what it could be, as opposed to the way I understand what it is. However, from the standpoint of Chochmah, no division of distinct letters exists, because Chochmah represents the quality of Ma, absolute bittul. It also represents the ultimate in unity and synthesis. Again, this the last point I want to elaborate on next week, but I want to just state this just so we have something to go on for next week, which is, on the state of Chochmah, when we understand something, it's so pure, it's so possible. The possibilities are so, it's not about me and how I understand it, it's about the concepts, the way they are, and the concepts, those truths, can manifest or could exist in so many different ways. I don't have it yet locked down in language the way I understand it. That's a function, he says, of the midot, of the emotions. In reality, it's also a function, a little bit of bina, understanding. That's already where I imprint my way of understanding it, my flavor, my angle on it. How I see things. Talking about a Hillel and a Shammai. Hillel sees things one way, Shammai sees things a little bit differently. Yeah, it's like a little bit of an imprint on things. So that already happens as letters begin forming. Letters, i.e., literally talking about language letters. When you understand something, you almost talk it through in your head, right? You've broken it down into letters and language. Even if you're not aware of it, it's encoded in letters, which means that it's stuck in the way you see it and understand it. Whereas Chochmah is that pre-language state of possibility of a concept where it can take on multiple forms that might be even contradictory. Because we know this, that you can have a concept that can break down or break out into two completely different ways. And they both could have truths. Again, like Hillel and Shammai. It's the same core concept or construct, not construct. It's the same core concept or rationale or logical thing, but it can go in it can fork into two different ways. The forking happens once language gets involved. Language gets involved once we understand it the way we understand it. But before that, the Chochmah state, it's still higher than that. Which tells us one thing. Living the Chochmah life, living the Chochmah life means I'm open. Nothing's locked in, I'm open. I see things this way, but you know what? I could see things the other way, and I can tolerate someone, I can love someone who sees things a little bit differently than I do. I can get along with another person, knowing that I'm not so locked in. Chochmah is the key, according to chapter 5 of Hecholzu, of this discourse. Chochmah is the key to bittul, or holds the key to bittul, to self-abnegation, and is the key to love. So originally the title of the email, and if you're not getting the email, let me know, I'll add you to the email list, was Understanding Hate. Because really, that was my play on words, because Bina is understanding, and Bina understanding, i.e. my way of understanding, can lead, not in of itself is bad, but can lead to a state where I'm hating on someone else, because I understand it this way, and you don't, therefore we have a problem. So understanding is really about, can breed intolerance. But I changed it because it sounded too negative to understanding love. But the truth is, understanding is not necessarily love. It's wisdom. It's Chochmah that's love. Chochmah allows us to be open to the other and to love the other, to create that synthesis because Chochmah is bittul. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes? Okay. So this week, let's practice, exercise our Chochmah. Be a little bit more open to others, and less locked in. It's good to be locked in to how we feel. It's also valid. It has its time. But if that's the only thing we have, then we're missing out on Chochmah, and maybe we're also missing out on the opportunity to really be open to others. Next week we continue chapter 5. We talk more about language and letters, more about the way the mind works, and as a special bonus, give me a second, we'll also speak about, let me quickly peruse the rest of chapter 5, we'll also speak about we'll also speak about more of the contrast between Chochmah and Bina, and Chesed and Gvura, and we're going to combine those two notions, the way they exist on an intellectual level and emotional level. Thank you very much for joining me this morning for Kabbalah.